This is an article in Genetics and Molecular Biology published in 2008. It's titled Soft Inheritance, Challenging the Modern Synthesis by Eva Jablonka and Marian Lamb. And the abstract reads, this paper presents some of the recent challenges to the modern synthesis of evolutionary theory, which has dominated evolutionary thinking for the last 60 years. The focus of the paper is the challenge of soft inheritance, the idea that variations that arise during development can be inherited. There is ample evidence showing that phenotypic variations that are independent of variations in DNA sequence and targeted DNA changes that are guided by epigenetic control systems are important sources of hereditary variation, and hence can contribute to evolutionary changes. Furthermore, under certain conditions, the mechanisms underlying epigenetic inheritance can also lead to saltational changes that reorganize the epigenome. These discoveries are clearly incompatible with the tenets of the modern synthesis, which denied any significant role for Lamarckian and saltational processes. In view of the data that support soft inheritance, as well as other challenges to the modern synthesis, it is concluded that the synthesis no longer offers a satisfactory theoretical framework for evolutionary biology. It has been known for many years that the rates of mutation, transposition, and recombination are lower when chromatin is condensed than when it has a more open conformation, and that the movement of transposable elements, which is recognized as a major cause of genomic change, is markedly influenced by various types of internal genetic and external environmental stress that affect DNA methylation and other components of chromatin. It is therefore clear that epigenetic variations can bias when and where in the genome genetic changes occur. However, the effect of epigenetic control mechanisms can go beyond the more or less localized mutational changes induced by local chromatin variations. Having surveyed the changes in genome structure that are a part of normal development in many plants and animals, Zufall et al. Suggested that developmentally regulated genome rearrangements that are under epigenetic control are an ancient feature of eukaryotes. So basically what that's saying is rates of mutation, changes in the DNA sequence, and transposition, that's when genes are transcribed and then reinserted in different parts of the genome, and recombination, when you have a single strand of DNA is combined back into a double strand DNA. Though the rates of all those processes are affected by whether or not the chromatin is condensed or not. And the chromatin it's basically when DNA is packaged around histone proteins, and they're not as easily accessible for transcription into like protein synthesis. So basically like an epigenetic element like DNA methylation, adding a methyl group to part of the histone protein will unpackage the chromatin, and then those genes can be accessed, and mutation, transposition, and recombination can occur on those areas of the genome more easily. And those adjustments aren't random. They're caused by genetic factors and environmental, like stress-induced factors, and those changes are all heritable. They can be passed down. These mechanisms are responsive to external and internal conditions and the genetic variations that they generate and that become subject to natural selection are domain-specific and chromosome-specific. They are not the random mutations that were central to the modern evolutionary synthesis, nor is the evolutionary change associated with them gradual. At the time that the synthesis was being constructed, Goldschmidt promoted the idea that systemic changes in genome underlie macroevolution, but for many years his views were assumed to be wrong. However, recent data from many biological fronts is changing this attitude. It seems that systemic heritable variations, both epigenetic and genetic, do occur and can lead to macroevolutionary changes. So it's kind of interesting. This is all just my speculation, but it's funny that this work on soft inheritance is being resisted, because when you read it, it sounds like it's supporting, like it says, macroevolutionary changes, these large-scale saltational events, like major changes in the organism in a short period of time. So you got to ask yourself, why is this work being resisted by the neo-Darwinians and the people that are holding up like the central dogma? And because when you read it, it sounds like it's giving evidence for these large-scale changes that would explain major variations to body plans and physiology of species. But the reason that Darwinian evolutionists are resisting it is it's taking away that random factor that they rely on. They really need this idea of random mutations that are selected for to explain complex organs and features, like I've talked about previously. So they don't really want this type of evolution, because this is all targeted and non-random and induced by the environment. Basically, it can be inferred from all of this that the organism is equipped from the outset with this sort of variability, like control of its chromatin packaging. That's a very purposeful, designed looking mechanism. And I think that's basically what it comes down to, is you're taking away the Darwinist mechanism that they need so badly. Conclusions. Contrary to the established view, soft inheritance is common. Variations acquired during an individual's lifetime can be passed on through epigenetic, behavioral, and symbolic inheritance. They can affect the rate and direction of evolution by introducing additional loci for selection, by revealing cryptic genetic variation, and by enhancing the generation of local genetic variations. Moreover, under conditions of stress, epigenetic control mechanisms affect genomic repatterning, which can lead to saltational changes. Evolutionary biology today has to incorporate soft inheritance, saltational changes due to systemic mutations, and various types of genetic exchange and cooperation. These all challenge the assumptions of the modern synthesis. We believe that rather than trying to continue to work within the framework of a synthesis that was made in the middle of the last century, we now need a new type of evolutionary theory, one that acknowledges Darwinian, Lamarckian, and saltational processes.